The Internet of Things, or IoT, can be the source of major cybersecurity threats, including data leakage, distributed denial of service attacks, and any attack that can be launched from botnets. Let's take a look at what the Internet of Things is and why it's part of the cybersecurity threat landscape. More and more devices are being connected to the Internet in the name of convenience and control. Key drivers for the growth of IoT devices include the rise of cloud computing as the foundational technology for IoT, plummeting cost of IoT devices, common usage of smartphones and tablets to control IoT devices, and easy access to Wi-Fi. Practically any electronic device can be connected to the internet and become an IoT device. Common IoT devices include smart home lights, switches, thermostats, home appliances, TVs, security cameras, and even locks. Many health devices are also directly connected to the internet, such as fitness trackers, connected scales, pedometers, and sleep monitors. Personal assistants that respond to voice commands are also popular. And of course, most modern vehicles are also IoT devices. And the number of IoT devices is projected to grow to more than 50 billion by 2025. The problem is IoT devices are often connected to the internet without thinking about their security. And IoT devices can be more vulnerable to attacks than servers and network devices connected to the internet. That's because they usually don't have enough computing power to support basic protections like anti-malware and firewalls. They also often have built-in backdoors for maintenance with default passwords that can easily be found on the internet. Because these IoT devices are usually directly connected to the internet, attackers can easily exploit these and other vulnerabilities with automated scripts. Once they have control of an IoT device, it can be added to a botnet or used as a jumping-off point to attack other devices on the same network. According to Symantec's Internet Security Threat Report, routers and connected cameras are the IoT devices most infected by malware and the main sources of IoT attacks, accounting for over 90% of malicious activity. One of the most dramatic examples of the threat of unmanaged IoT devices is the Mirai botnet. The attackers built their botnet army by running a simple script against devices on the internet that attempted to log in with 61 known IoT default passwords. If they successfully logged in, the IoT device was infected with malware that directed them to follow the instructions of a central command and control system. The attack was very effective. It's estimated that there were nearly 500,000 Mirai-infected IoT devices, mostly composed of closed-circuit TV cameras, DVRs, and routers. They were used to conduct distributed denial of service, or DDoS attacks, against a wide variety of targets. Some good news is governments and regulatory bodies are recognizing the problem of poor or no security standards for devices connecting to the internet. They're proposing minimum security standards for device manufacturers and labeling to raise the awareness of users about how secure their devices are. These requirements are being enforced as laws, like the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act, which was signed into U.S. law in 2020. But with next-generation internet capabilities like 5G dramatically increasing data speeds and throughput, we may see IoT devices continue being a key player on the cybersecurity threat landscape well into the future. The number of Internet of Things, or IoT devices, is growing rapidly, and so are the related threats when they're deployed in an unsecure way. The good news is there are some straightforward steps you can take to protect your organization from the threat of unmanaged IoT devices. It's important to understand, though, that some IoT devices are so poorly designed that they may be challenging to secure. For instance, they might not allow you to change default passwords. So we'll start by looking at a few effective security actions you can take at the network level, even if the IoT devices themselves are hard to secure. First, you should conduct an IT asset inventory. Run network scans like Nmap to know which systems and devices are on your network. This will help you identify IoT devices you may not have known about. Investigate any that seem out of the ordinary and remove any unauthorized devices. Second is network segmentation. Now that you have an inventory of your network assets, the next step is to identify which ones are your critical information assets and where they are in your network. Use your routers and switches to segment your network and isolate your critical assets from IoT devices as much as possible. Finally, block ports. Figure out which network ports the IoT devices need and block traffic at the firewall for any other ports. Especially block Telnet, port 23, unless it's absolutely required. Telnet was the protocol that the Mirai attack software used to compromise hundreds of thousands of IoT devices. Some IoT devices, on the other hand, are easier to secure. If that's the case, then at a minimum, implement the following. Change default passwords when possible. This is easily the most important way you can protect your organization and data from attacks against your IoT devices. Attackers know the most common IoT default passwords and will use them to compromise your devices. Changing the default password keeps these attacks from being successful. Next, configure strong security if possible. Practice the least privilege principle, and only give the device and accounts that access it the ability to do what they should be doing and no more. Set restrictive security controls on the device itself if that's an option. And third, install software updates and patches. If the manufacturer is supporting their IoT devices with periodic software updates and patches, make sure you install them in a timely manner. They may include important security fixes that will help protect your IoT devices from attacks. The Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, published the IoT Top 10, which is a list of the key vulnerabilities to avoid when building, deploying, or managing IoT systems. If you're responsible for securing IoT devices, I recommend reviewing this list to make sure you've protected against all of these vulnerabilities. By implementing these and the other protections I covered in this video, you'll significantly reduce your exposure to the threat of unmanaged IoT devices. Most of the dangers on the cybersecurity threat landscape come from malicious actors outside of your organization. Shadow IT is different, though, because this threat comes from within your organization, and many times it's not malicious. That doesn't mean it's not a serious problem. Let's take a look at Shadow IT and why it's part of the cybersecurity threat landscape. Shadow IT refers to the unauthorized use of systems, software, personal devices, or cloud services by enterprise employees. To best manage and secure IT systems, all technology purchases should be approved and budgeted by a shared services IT function. But users will sometimes go around IT and purchase technology with their own budget. When implemented, this unsanctioned and often unmanaged technology solution becomes part of the shadow IT in the enterprise. IT will either find out about these shadow implementations after they've been deployed, or even worse, not at all. There are many reasons behind the rise of shadow IT, but some of the most common are understaffed IT departments that can't support the IT needs of users, the perception by users that IT is too slow or restrictive with technology deployments, and easy access to software as a service or SaaS solutions like Dropbox, Salesforce, or Amazon Web Services. Shadow IT can represent a large amount of spending in organizations. In fact, Gartner has estimated that shadow IT accounts for 30 to 40% of IT spending in large enterprises. Other research states that this number could be even higher. But many enterprise leaders either aren't aware of the shadow IT problem or downplay it as not that big of a deal. That can be a costly mistake because there are real risks associated with shadow IT. Simply put, it's impossible for the enterprise to secure systems that the organization's IT function isn't even aware of. Here are just a few of the shadow IT risks. First is data loss. If the shadow IT systems are processing or storing important information, it probably isn't being included in the enterprise backup solution. So if the data is lost, there's no chance for recovery. Even worse, if the information is confidential and the shadow IT systems aren't secured, that could lead to a data breach. Next is unpatched vulnerabilities. Shadow IT systems probably aren't being included in vulnerability scans or scheduled patch cycles. That means these systems could have vulnerabilities that expose them to attacks and possible data breaches. And lack of security compliance. All sanctioned IT solutions should be deployed with standard security controls that may not exist on shadow IT systems. These could include anti-malware, encryption, security monitoring, and more. An enterprise could be subject to big fines if a data breach occurs on shadow IT systems that aren't compliant with enterprise or regulatory security controls. We can expect that IT departments will continue being challenged by users who circumvent required processes for implementing IT solutions. For this reason, we'll likely see shadow IT being part of the cybersecurity threat landscape for some time. Shadow IT, as the name implies, can be challenging to both detect and prevent. In this video, I'll cover some specific actions you can take to reduce the likelihood and impact of shadow IT in your organization. First, let's look at some fundamental controls for protecting against shadow IT. These are steps you should be taking anyway, but if you aren't, your exposure to the shadow IT threat increases a lot. The first control you need to have is an IT asset inventory. If you don't have a current inventory of your sanctioned IT assets, you won't be able to identify shadow IT systems. Run an Nmap scan or use a similar tool to get a baseline of systems currently on your network. Review the results to make sure all systems you found are authorized and deal with any that aren't. Next, make sure users know about correct IT deployment processes. It's hard to blame users who don't follow the system when they don't know what it is. Define a clear IT deployment process and write it down. Publish it in a place that's easy for users to find and heavily promote it. Finally, implement and enforce strong security policies that prohibit unauthorized deployment of IT systems or solutions. Security policies should be approved by executive leadership and should clearly state what is allowed when it comes to IT deployments. That way, you'll have an answer when asked why shadow IT systems need to be removed. There are also several technology controls that will help keep shadow IT from becoming a serious problem in your organization. First is security monitoring. Security monitoring systems like a Security Information and Event Management System, or SIEM, can track all network activity and notify the IT or security team if an unauthorized system is added to the network. This may be an indication of shadow IT or another type of security incident. Next, consider ways to implement Network Access Control, or NAC. This is a technical security restriction that only allows authorized systems, such as those with enterprise-issued certificates, from joining your network. With NAC in place, if a user attempts to add shadow IT systems to the network, they wouldn't be able to connect. Finally, consider using a Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB. CASB is a technology that sits between users and the cloud services they try to use. CASBs can enforce security controls on the use of software as a service or SaaS applications. They can also monitor your organization's network traffic to detect any cloud-based applications in use. You can use that information to detect shadow IT SaaS applications. By implementing the fundamental and technology security controls I covered in this video, you should significantly reduce your exposure to the threat of shadow IT. All organizations have what is called an attack surface. This is the part of the organization that is exposed to any kind of threat. One of the biggest attack surfaces for most organizations is their supply chains and exposures to third parties. This attack surface is also one of the most challenging to protect. In this video, I'll cover what supply chain and third-party risks are and why they're part of the cybersecurity threat landscape. Every organization has suppliers. They provide the needed resources for that organization to function. These suppliers can be software as a service or other technology providers that are critical to your business. And these suppliers have their own suppliers, and those suppliers have suppliers, and so on. If a direct or downstream supplier fails, that could have a negative impact on your organization. That's the idea of supply chain risk. Now let's think about the access your suppliers and other third parties might have to your systems and data. If third parties like suppliers, contractors, and vendors need access to your systems to provide their services, that can create risk. For instance, if one of your vendors has access to your systems and they get hacked, now the hackers can attack your systems. This is what happened to a major retailer, which led to a security breach that cost an estimated $202 million. On top of that, consider all the data your organization stores with third parties. Cloud-based software as a service or SaaS applications like Dropbox, Salesforce, and Google Drive can store some of your organization's most critical data. And your organization may be storing its data with other third parties that aren't SaaS apps. If the right controls aren't in place, that data may be accessible to malicious actors outside or inside of your organization. Finally, we have software supply chain risk. Many organizations develop software for their own internal systems or to provide the services they offer. Instead of writing everything from scratch, developers will often use free open source software. But open source software comes with potential problems. It can be hard to keep track of, especially if your organization develops a lot of software. And open source software can contain vulnerabilities or even malicious code. For instance, an open source Java logging library called Log4j was used by software found on millions of servers around the world. But a zero-day vulnerability was found in Log4j, which allowed remote code execution attacks that could be used to compromise these servers. Every organization who developed its own software immediately needed to determine if any of their software contained Log4j, and if it did, patch it. As you can see, supply chain and third-party risks can be highly complex and have serious consequences for your organization. That's why they're an important part of the cybersecurity threat landscape. Most organizations rely on supply chains and grant access to third parties in order to provide their goods or services. But this supply chain reliance and third-party access can create a large attack surface that needs to be protected. Let's look at steps you can take to protect your organization against these supply chain and third-party risks. The best way to address third-party risks is to build a formal third-party risk management program, or TPRM. I'll give you a quick overview of what a TPRM might look like. First, you'll create an inventory of all your organization's third-party suppliers and vendors. You'll need to work with subject matter experts from across your organization to get this done. Second, determine which of these suppliers and vendors are critical to your business. Next, identify all third parties who have access to your data or systems. Then, based on their business criticality and access, assign risk ratings to each of these third parties. And finally, use these risk ratings to prioritize identifying alternatives to your critical suppliers and implementing third-party security controls. Here are some security controls that can help protect against risks associated with third-party access. Follow the least privilege principle to only grant third parties the access they need to do their job. Require third parties to use multi-factor authentication or MFA when accessing your systems. Monitor the activity of third parties when they access your systems with a secure information event management system or SIEM or other monitoring solution. Ensure any third-party access is revoked immediately when no longer needed. And take steps to verify that third parties have strong security controls in place, like reviewing their security certification documentation or requiring them to complete security questionnaires. Also, work with your legal team to require strong security controls in your contracts with third parties who have access to your data. As you can see, building a TPRM can take a lot of effort, and many organizations choose to outsource some or all of this work. But no matter how you tackle it, a good TPRM is the best way to manage and reduce many supply chain and third-party risks. When it comes to your software supply chain, here are some steps you can take to reduce the risk of vulnerable or malicious open source software being included in your organization's code. First, you should conduct software code inventories or audits. Work with your developers to create a software bill of materials or SBOM. This is a formal record that contains the supply chain relationships of the components used to build your organization's software. SBOMs are like the list of ingredients on a food package, and they can identify where open source software is used in your organization's code. You can find more information about SBOMs, including how to generate them, on the National Telecommunications and Information Administration website at ntia.gov/SBOM. There are also application security companies that can analyze your developer's code to generate SBOMs for you. Next, review the results of the SBOMs with your developers, focusing on the open source software. Confirm with them that all open source software components are still needed and have been updated as much as possible. And finally, consider implementing a secure development standard that restricts the use of open source software that hasn't been updated in years. Supply chain and third-party risks can be challenging to manage. Take what you've learned in this video to start implementing the controls that will help reduce these risks. In this course, I've described some of the most common cybersecurity threats you're likely to encounter. To best protect against them, your next step after watching these videos would be to figure out which of these threats apply to your organization. Then find out if the security controls for those threats are in place and apply any that are missing. By following the recommendations in these videos, you'll definitely reduce your exposure to these threats. But the challenge is, cybersecurity threats keep evolving to overcome even the best defenses. Just because you're secure today doesn't mean new threats won't be a problem tomorrow. So how do you keep up? Let's look at 3 actions you can take to keep ahead of cybersecurity threats. First, stay up to date with changes in the cybersecurity threat landscape. I recommend subscribing to security newsletters like SANS News Bites and Bruce Schneier's Cryptogram. There are a lot of weekly security podcasts that cover current cybersecurity threats like Security Weekly News and Defense in Depth. There are also plenty of cybersecurity magazines with articles about the latest threats like InfoSecurity Magazine and Cyber Defense Magazine. Next, to get a more in-depth look at cybersecurity threats, attend security conferences and seminars. Presentation topics will often explore current threats in detail. Conferences and seminars are also good ways to connect with security professionals who have first-hand knowledge of the latest cybersecurity threats and how they've dealt with them. Finally, hire security professionals who specialize in cybersecurity threat simulation and management. These include companies and consultants who conduct penetration tests, threat modeling, and DDoS simulations. I hope you use the knowledge you gain from this course to protect you and your organization from current and future cybersecurity threats. Hackers can exploit them. Your employees play a key role in preventing APT and espionage, where the attacker steals sensitive data to sell to an APT is detected. This involves isolating compromised systems, thoroughly investigating third-party contractors, and business partners. The reason why insider threats can sometimes be more dangerous than outside threats is because trusted insiders have been given access to assets and data based on that trust, and that access